normally referred to the graveyard shift being the one straight after lunch. What is this one called? I'm just trying to see how many people we've got in here. We've got a few, which is encouraging to see. I'm going to start with a question first. How many entrepreneurs, startups do we have in the room left with us today? Entrepreneurs, startups, can you put your hand up for me? I'm trying to see, do we have some? I hope we have a few, because this next session is specifically focused on you. Because what we're doing today is we're going to discuss that ecosystem which is formed around entrepreneurs, startups, to help them succeed, to help them thrive, to help them come up with those next basket of really innovative sort of ideas which are going to help drive growth across all the industries, not just FinTech. And the reason why this is important is because I did some research recently. Working at The Economist means that I get to do a lot of research, I get to survey a lot of executives. And so I did some research recently, and a whole bunch of executives told me that they are going through their own digital transformation initiatives. And what they're hoping to get out of this, their main goals are still about cost saving and improved operational efficiency. Way down the list are these ideas to try and create innovative new ideas and products and services. So they're not fully focused on it, so we need to encourage and support the entrepreneurs and startups to be able to get those great innovative ideas together. So for us to understand what the environment is like, what the ecosystem is like, and how we can develop in the right way, we've got some great panelists here today, which I'm going to invite up onto the stage now. I'm going to let them introduce themselves all in a moment, but what we have are some great actors from different parts of that entrepreneurial ecosystem. Some here from Hong Kong, some from Singapore as well, so we get a bit of geographic comparison going on. Please have a seat, join me, excellent. And you can introduce yourselves in a moment for me. We don't have very long today, 30 minutes. I am going to try and focus some time for Q&A at the end if you have any burning questions for our guest today. But the first question I want to ask, I'd like you to introduce each of yourselves as we go around. But I want to ask you, is there any genuine innovation still going on out there? And if we're thinking about FinTech as well, or are our entrepreneurs and startups a little bit bereft of those great ideas? Are we still just thinking about the next payment app, for example? Or are we getting much genuine innovation coming through? So if I could start with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimmy Paulino. I am with Rainmaking Innovation. We do corporate innovation consultancy on strategy and innovation investment. We do commercial pilot programs, facilitate this between the corporate and the startups, and we also do venture development for corporates. Our team actually got spun out from Startup Bootcamp, which is an accelerator, and this was we have 6 FinTech programs worldwide right now, and Singapore was part of this. So in terms of genuine innovation happening right now, there's certainly a lot beyond payments. It's just about being in the right time, the right place, having the right market for it, and also I think right now it's a perfect time to have more innovation out there, because the corporates, the VCs, the startups are talking the same language already, versus 2-3 years ago where it was still a gap in terms of understanding how to make use of technology or innovation out there.
That's interesting. I wonder if everybody would agree that corporates and startups are speaking the same language. Are they doing that or not? But anyway, let's move on. Amanda, intro for yourself, please. Is there genuine innovation going on out there?
Great. Hi, I'm Amanda Williams. I'm head of Nest Innovation. And so we work to empower startups. And we do that in a number of ways. We've got a venture fund. We run corporate innovation programs where we're really trying to do that translation piece and help corporates and startups kind of make the most of that relationship together. I think there is still a little work to be done, but it is getting better. And then we also have a space where entrepreneurs can connect. So here in Hong Kong, that's Meta. If you haven't been there whilst you're visiting, please come down and see us in Lang Kwai Fung. And I think in the FinTech space, you know, a lot of what's going on is a little bit of a kind of faster horse stuff. It is doing things better, but we're still FinTech companies are still kind of acting like regular banks. They're providing the same kind of retail services, transaction, credit, etc. I think some of the really exciting actual innovation in the FinTech space specifically is happening with bringing new customers into the fold. So thinking about kind of how are we accessing using technology to help the unbanked. So there's something like 2 billion people in the world that don't have bank accounts yet. That's a huge new customer segment for financial services. So I think there's some really interesting innovation going on there. So one of the programs that we worked with in a recent Bangkok Bank program is a company called First Circle, and they're all about small business loans. So getting more money into very small businesses in a very, reducing that transaction fees, et cetera, and really spurring the economy on. So I think there's some really interesting things happening in that space.
Excellent. Veronika, I'm seeing some nodding here. You agree that there is some genuine innovation going on?
Yeah, especially the point on access, I really agree with that. I think it's a key point for innovation. It just allows much wider access to a lot more people in financial products and services. So I'm Veronika from Supercharger. Supercharger is a homegrown FinTech accelerator that started in Hong Kong 3 years ago. And we also work to connect startups with all types of resources that they need to grow and scale their business. We also work with international companies that come and scale here in Asia, so we introduce them to the local market. And we also work with corporates as well to make sure that the innovation is essentially much wider impacting than smaller companies as well. I'm absolutely certain there is innovation happening, and to me, I think the biggest areas of that is in certain new technologies, emerging technologies, and we're still at a stage where we're figuring out how to use those, but we can see that there is a massive shift, for example, in my mind, in the decentralized way of exchanging value. That is quite an exciting innovation, and also in a distributed ledger way of recording what is happening and the tracking everything. And also there is innovation within corporates, within banks as well. I've seen a lot of interesting initiatives come out of corporates.
Innovations in corporates is probably an area you know very well yourself, Adrian.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Adrian Seto, and I lead innovation in FinTech for Accenture and our financial services practice here in the region. I also lead the FinTech Innovation Lab for us here, and also a accelerator focused on FinTech startups on an annual program that we run. I really like Kimmy's point around is there is kind of that attempt to speak the same language. And what we're starting to see now is around what corporates, to Veronika's point, is they're also reaching out to us and saying, how do we innovate? And the conversation actually is now kind of transformed in what we're seeing is that it's not just purely about the technology. It's actually broadly more speaking in terms of how do they change their organization. And I know part of the topic's around culture change. So our approach there is looking at it in a way that is how do you holistically change and look at it from a holistic manner and change and transform as these technologies that you're putting into place are starting to affect different stakeholders. It's going to affect different parts of your business. It's not just a bottom line effect, right? People's jobs are going to change, if you put in AI, automation, and all those type of things. And how does legal going to change? And how does it all kind of come together? So one of the things that's interesting to note is that over the last, 5 years, let's say, with FinTech, all of these technologies have come out. People always say, what's the new technology? And I was like, well, I think what's more important is to say, how are all these technologies going to start to talk to each other in your organization, right? I was listening to a great podcast the other day and say, if you have Alexa running your house and you have Google Home running your house, they all kind of speak a different language. And then, so if you say something and if they both pick it up, what does it actually mean? So is some of this technology going to be more conversational, for example, in that space, in the natural language processing? It's not really conversational right now. But then actually, how does it all kind of fit together and how does it all plug in and work with each other? And I think that's really kind of what we're seeing as the next step.
Yeah, I mean, some good points there. You mentioned working with each other, speaking the same language, and I think this is a big part of being able to create that ecosystem, that environment to help encourage, nurture startups, entrepreneurs with those innovative ideas, which is what our focus here of this panel is. So let's drill down that in a bit more detail and look at some of those good examples out there of how different stakeholders within this collaborative ecosystem, if you like, are working together to create a great environment. And I've got a good example I'm going to start with. I recently interviewed the Asia CIO from Cargill. And if you don't know Cargill, it's a very large food company, the world's largest probably. It's a large company. And he told me a couple of interesting things, or one interesting thing, or maybe actually two interesting things, one which is not relevant to this panel, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because he told me that what Cargill, they have a lot of turkeys, which they provide to the US market, and they've started putting QR codes on their turkeys and registering all of this on a, let's call it a turkey blockchain, so that American consumers are able to track the origin of these turkeys. It's quite an interesting thing. I didn't know that they did such a thing, a turkey blockchain. There's some amazing uses for blockchain. Well, that's one I didn't think of. But so getting back to the point here, something more relevant is, so Cargill, they do some work with SG Innovate to try and identify, and SG Innovate is a Singapore government agency, to try and identify really good entrepreneurs and startups so that they can then put some more support behind it, funding, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to identify who these good startups are. And they do that by, Cargill goes out to these entrepreneurs and startups and provides them with a genuine business problem that they need fixing. Here is a challenge. Here's something we don't know how to resolve ourselves. You think about it. Can you fix it? Can you do it? And I thought that was a really nice example of bringing together government organizations to support this, the corporate sector, and entrepreneurs, focusing them on real life examples. You work on a lot of partnerships as well. Any interesting examples like that you're seeing out in the marketplace? Can you give us some insight on the sort of things that you're doing?
Well, first of all, in terms of putting out your challenge out there for entrepreneurs to solve, this doesn't work all the time. More because there are certain technology that does not answer to the challenge at the moment. It's not ripe yet. So being able to discern what focus area you have to go for at the moment for short-term, mid-term, and long-term is something corporates should think about, and having that portfolio of investments in terms of their innovation. But in terms of interesting partnerships out there, so one of the startups from yesterday, Jumper AI, is actually an alumni from Startup Bootcamp, and they do social commerce. What started out to be more of an e-commerce payments kind of a solution became just beyond like retail. Now it can be used for movie tickets, for games, for sports. So the partnerships that they got were beyond what they were thinking about when they first got into the program. And it was a lot of other corporates seeing that what it can do for FinTech and learn that, oh, I can apply it to this segment, and working together for that. Another example would be a FinTech company on fraud. It's very focused on working with banking clients, but what the opportunity was for them to work with an airline company that we found that was looking for a solution. So we paired them up. We facilitated a design sprint for them to see if they can work together. And true enough, they found over $12 million of fraud just with 3 months of pilot. So,
wow.
So that's very interesting.
I love that idea of just sort of shoving a random group of people together with differing backgrounds to see if they had a different viewpoint on trying to overcome a specific problem. It's a great idea. Do you have other interesting examples of partnerships? How do you about Nest?
Well, so I mean, I think one of the things, the way that corporate innovation has really kind of moved on in this kind of partnership space. So obviously there's partnerships with governments and with ecosystem and different supporters and stuff, but also within the corporate themselves. So when I was in corporate innovation myself in kind of corporate venture capital, we were doing things very much in silos, right? So the VC team would go out, meet a startup, get to know them, invest, the rest of the company didn't really know what was going on. And now, when we work with corporates, so we're working right now with DBS, which I think is already quite an innovative bank here in Hong Kong. And you know, when we take them in to talk with startups, it's not just the team that's going to be using the solution that has the problem themselves. You know, they're bringing in the technology team, they're bringing in their VC guys, they're bringing in, you know, so they're creating this kind of ecosystem internally to talk about the innovation, so that they're really asking all the right questions. You know, how would we, you know, integrate this in future? How would we all work together to solve this problem? So I think these idea of partnerships is, even inside, you know, the corporates that are working with these startups is a really key thing. It's not just one team. It's really got to be more than that.
Are you seeing corporates, they're getting better at this? Is this an isolated example? Or
No, I do. I do think that corporates are getting better. It's taken a while. It's taken a while, and there are still hurdles, you know, especially because you just have so many different levels, you know, of management. So, you know, sometimes the top gets it, sometimes the bottom gets it. It's really hard to find companies where the top and the bottom get it. You know, that's the sweet spot.
Do we have an example?
So
Top and bottom gets it?
Yeah, I mean, I think DBS is a great one, actually. You know, we've had really great interaction from the kind of working level teams. You know, and very strong support from even the team, the headquarters back in Singapore. So they've been coming out for demo days and really interacting from that angle. So yeah, so that's one that I'm quite happy about so far. And hopefully there'll be more.
I read an example not too long ago from Piège Gupta, the CEO of DBS, who talked about Payla, the payments app, and talking about the only way he was able to get that product to market. Now, if there's any DPS people here, they may have a differing view on this. Rob, who's walking away, might have a differing view. But he said the only way to get that to market was that him personally had to go around and bash heads together and say, right, you guys need to talk to you guys to make all of this happen, the back end, the front end, everything. And it only happened because of him to do that.
Yeah, but they are getting better. They've learned from that example. So this is current now that they're getting better.
Excellent. Veronika.
Yeah, sure. So what I've observed, I guess, is some sort of evolution of innovation culture in the past couple of years. So originally it started more as a renovation rather than innovation. So, you know, as you mentioned, give a few problems and say, oh, we need to fix these things, make it work better. Now I think that people look at it at different dimensions, so they also engage in these kind of marginal improvement projects, which is great. They're generally quite easy to convince people that they make sense, and they deliver fast results, and everyone's happy. But also at the same time, you need to have some sort of larger scale rethinking of the way you do things. So, you know, a little bit more blue sky thinking about, you know, if we were to redo this again entirely, how would we do it if we were to build it all from scratch today? And this is, for example, what challenger banks are doing, which is very interesting. Also, I think in terms of the internal culture that we see, it's becoming a lot more entrepreneurial, but also, you know, there is a lot more engagement now of previous entrepreneurs into larger corporates, and they are bringing these ideas, and, you know, they are launching these new apps and products that are more kind of innovative and startup-y than usual. So there's innovation happening in different scales, but at the same time, you know, with the engagement with external innovation companies now, I see a lot more, rather than, you know, just buy a product and launch it. It's a continuous innovation journey where you know, the corporates are essentially building IP together with a startup, or they're partnering long term. In some cases, they are buying and acquiring. In other cases, they're building it themselves as well. So there's a lot going on, and, you know, there's many examples. For example, in our cohorts as well, there are some projects that are they fall closely to this kind of, you know, marginal improvement type, internal improvement, but there's others that are, you know, much bigger, to do with, you know, customer-facing products, for example, robo-advisory, for example. You know, David Rosa was here from NEAT yesterday, and he talked about his journey as well. They're starting with retail customers. Now they have essentially banking products for SMEs as well, and give access to banking to people who previously struggled to gain access in the, you know, traditional banking system. So a lot going on, yeah.
You mentioned your cohorts. Is it a challenge these days to find good cohorts, a good supply of entrepreneurs, startups coming through in your cohorts? Is it easier or harder than 3 years ago, for example?
I would say it's harder to pick which ones to actually join the cohort because there's so many very strong, good applicants, especially now they have a few years of really good traction, and it's almost, it was very difficult for us to actually shortlist 10 companies from all the applicants that we received because there were so many amazing solutions. We were literally fighting in the office because everyone had a favorite one that they could see themselves using, and they really wanted to get them in the cohort. So I think it's less so you see the large unicorns now that started 10 years ago in Silicon Valley, but there are many smaller ones that essentially have such a big impact as well.
Okay. For those entrepreneurs, startups out there, hear that? They're fighting over you in the back rooms. Which one is the best? Which one they want to accept on their program? Adrian?
I think that I could probably give two good examples. I think one is coming out of our FinTech Innovation Lab. So we partner with 18 financial institutions in the program last year, and it consists of banks and insurance companies, and we put them together in a room, and we choose these startups that come into to our accelerator program, and they talk to each other, and these are typically competing institutions. Right, so they themselves have to collaborate and work together and form some sort of a partnership within this program as we go on this journey. We've been doing this for several years, so that in itself is a good example. Another good example is when you look about partnerships, it actually comes down to successful collaboration. So in our digital studio at Accenture, it's actually built as a collaborative space, where we actually have clients come in. We talked a little bit about this. Have clients come in and work with us. And a really good example of this is we typically have clients actually see other clients. We don't actually go, you hide them away. And so we actually had Adidas in and right next to Asia Miles. And Adidas, we helped them launch a digital vending machine. And this is nothing to do with FinTech, but during one of the breaks, one of the Asia Miles people saw what they were doing, and they were like, hey, how can we get some of our things as part of your digital vending machine? And so part of the rewards to reward the runners, which was the whole concept, was to give them Asia Miles as part of that. And this was kind of more of an organic case of how they ended up coming together. But the point is that it's about collaboration. It's about where they end up. And one of the important things is in order for them to collaborate, they have to be outside of their office in order for that to happen. If they were doing this on their own in a silo as a company, that would have never come together per se.
Yeah, you were talking about earlier about the importance of companies designing really nice collaborative spaces. I mean, they might spending a decent amount of money on a refit so that you can attract clients to come in and spend some time there, but it also helps encourage your employees to be happier and more productive as well. We at the Economist, we recently had a refit on our office. I wouldn't say it was now a Googleplex type of office now, but we have new carpet and wallpaper. So if you ever want to come down and visit, I'm based in the Singapore office. Feel free to come and look me up. Nice and collaborative space. I'm going to pass it over to questions if we have any questions out there from our audience. I'm pleased to see we've got a few more people filtered back into the room. I hope you're finding our panel interesting, and I'm now gazing around the room to see if we've got any questions, but I can't see any hands up. If you do think of one, stick your hand up. We've got 7 minutes and 20 seconds left, and we can cover it. I'm sure we will have time. Let's change tack a little bit and think about the entrepreneurs themselves, them personally, and how we can help create an environment so that they can personally succeed. And I want to think about this in terms of the profile, the talent, the skills of these entrepreneurs, because I mean the world is changing. The technologies we're trying to leverage to affect that change and create new products and services are also changing as well. Does this mean we've also seen a change in the profile, in the skill set of entrepreneurs as well? Are they coming from a different type of background? Do they need different skills? I mean, traditionally you would have the average startup team would have the leadership team would have 3 people, and there would be a charismatic leader, there would be a tech person, and there would be an operations person, something like that. Are we seeing the same thing? Are they changing?
You probably have a finance background person now to that group. Someone who just quit their finance job recently.
We're talking about FinTech here, disillusioned bankers.
But in terms of the makeup, like what makes them a good entrepreneur, the characters and the skills, it's more or less the same, but it's about how they maneuver around corporates, working with banks, being able to do BD, like find sales before their runway runs out, and to survive this tough market full of regulatory compliance issues. Yeah,
good point. I did some research recently which said one of the growing skills required by entrepreneurs and companies as well when you're thinking about digital transformation are people with these change management skills. So, we're trying to affect change here. So it's no-brainer that you need people with those change management skills. You need to know more than just about the tech, for example. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're still running a business. You still have to manage your cash flow, and you have to build a team, and you have to be a leader. So all of that is still the same. I think, especially within the FinTech space, there's very much this focus on using banks, using corporates as channels to market. And so there is that need to have an understanding of what it means to get your product out. It isn't just, oh my gosh, I made this amazing thing, here you go, and they'll be able to roll it out to all their customers. You've got to think about the integration, the regulation, all of these much more complicated things. So having an understanding of that change management process, understanding how much slower and more methodical and, that the corporate is going to be about all of these things, and being able to, kind of tailor your enthusiasm a little bit, and slow down a little bit to match the pace of the corporate to help them really adopt and integrate your technology. So I think very much, as Kimmy was saying, it is these often, slightly more seasoned people we're seeing in a lot of the FinTech space, at least somebody on the team who has, a long career within a bank.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. It's a complicated industry, financial services, obviously. And so you need that experience, that background to be able to navigate it, if you like. It's probably another topic for another panel, which is all about the skill sets that we need people to be developing within the academic and the school system to help feed through and drive some of these entrepreneurs of the future. In a FinTech sense, it's probably a few years away, if you like. But it's an interesting question around the role of government and how supportive they need to be for this. And you disclosed to me before something you heard yesterday, a new initiative from the Hong Kong government. Maybe you can share this. This is the golden bullet, if you like, in terms of creating, having a plethora of people with the right skills.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a definite need for kind of talent development in schools, and I think in Hong Kong they're looking at trying to provide subsidies to businesses to hire people with STEM PhDs, and that was going to be the solution to really take us forward in the kind of smart cities world. And I think in terms of what really makes or breaks an entrepreneur, STEM skills are great. I think very, very important, but actually it's about taking that risk, understanding the risk, and building a business is much more kind of creative thinking. It's teamwork, it's leadership, there's so much more than just a stem cell qualification.
Yes.
So I think we need to do a little bit more to kind of widen out that education and the talent development activity. I think there's some great programs in Hong Kong universities, venture development. So they're running competitions for students to be setting up their own businesses, social enterprises as well. So really getting them to think about purpose and what they can be doing, to kind of help their own society. So there are some great things happening, but we just need to kind of keep nurturing that, and so that they don't just then go work in a bank and forget about it for 20 years and then come out after that. So how do we keep that chain going?
Do any of you get involved in that? I mean, how closely do you work with the education system to try and guide them on the, on the sort of skills they need and the sort of, because they can't work in isolation.
So we actually have an education work stream in Supercharger, and we partnered with HKU and launched a massive open online course on FinTech, which is a MOOC known as. And the goal of that is essentially to offer a foundational level of information and understanding on emerging technologies, new business models, all of these key things that are going on in the world and will impact the day-to-day jobs of everyone who's working in finance today, but also the future, everyone who's studying finance for tomorrow as well. So it's extremely important. Another thing that I would say is important on this is also to tap into resources available. So, this is a great example, but there's lots of other things that, entrepreneurs can tap into. Talent is one of them, but, there's various support available, programs, grants, co-working spaces, literally talking to like-minded people, potential leads on anything you may need, fundraising, clients, etc., etc. So, entrepreneurs still have to have vision and be able to execute. That's always the case. But more and more, it's kind of becoming now a, better serviced area where there are a lot of people like us that essentially aim to help along the way the journey of the entrepreneurs.
Excellent. Something to add?
I think to Veronika's point is us giving back, right? Those of us who've been doing this for a while or currently doing it and looking into the education system. And saying, committing our time to giving back. And saying, like a lot of university, even high schools now, have maker labs or studios. And I've done some of that where I've gone in and coached them on pitching and presenting. And a lot of them are very young, right? But again, if you plant the right seed at that time, they feel the confidence to do that. And so it's not the lack of ideas, it's not the lack of wanting to be an entrepreneur and choosing that other route of not going to a traditional corporate environment, but sometimes it's giving them the confidence that they can do it, right? And oftentimes they'll see people like Jack Ma, whoever, and say, oh wow, I want to be that person, but they never get to meet him, or but then they get to, for us, we're able to go and say, hey, look, we have experience and we can coach you through some of these things. I think that's equally important. But I want to make probably one final comment on your point about change management and around the skills around that. It's interesting because us being known as a technology consulting firm, so clients always come to us and first thing is saying, how do I deploy blockchain? How do I do AI? How can I, And what we found is that that's not the right question. The question is, what is the problem, what you mentioned, right? What is the business challenge that you're trying to solve? And then looking at, maybe there's a technology piece to it, but maybe it's just the way you're trying to think about the problem is not working. So your approach and maybe thinking of ideas, and quite often there really isn't you don't need a complicated or complex technology to solve the problem. As I talked about, the Fjord is the company that we acquired. Is the design and how you are looking at that is broken, because the world has changed. It's becoming more digital. You need to change the way you solve. And really, technology is only an enabler to all of those things.
I would absolutely agree with this point, and I would also add that innovation, when you look at it retrospectively after it's happened, it's so simple and obvious that it seems that you almost can't imagine your life before that and without it. So to me, that's why it's incredibly important to ask the right questions and really simplify. Ah
yes, hindsight. We would all love that. Perfect. We are out of time. My red board is flashing up here, but this has been really interesting. I think it's really exciting to know and gratifying to see that there is so much support out there for entrepreneurs and startups as they go through this journey, as they're thinking about those new, genuinely disruptive and innovative ideas. I did some research recently, which it was a whole bunch of startups and entrepreneurs across 10 cities, including Hong Kong and Singapore, and they said the primary avenues they go to for information and support, number one, are online communities. which is great to see. There's a lot of vibrant communities out there to access. A close second were events like this. So for those of you who are here, you're doing the right thing. This is the right place to get information and support. And then after that were innovation labs, were the types of organizations that you have as well. So put all those together, I think we've got a really positive, supportive ecosystem out there. We're out of time. Thank you for your attention today. Sorry we didn't have any more questions, but we will be mingling around. If you want to ask us anything, please feel free to hit us up. But can you join me in thanking my panelists today? Thank you.